Hello and welcome to another video. In today's video we're going to be continuing work on our Wheelhorse Raider 9. Now in today's video we're going to be explaining how our Raider 10 became a Raider 9 and see what we need to do to get it started. Now, in today's video, you might have noticed I've got a different brace in my mouth, which limits my speech even more. So, if you need a translation for any of this, let me know in the comments. But, on to the model number. Now, in a previous video, you may remember us talking about this, and the fact that the engine spec number and the back axle, which is 6-speed, as we would call it, or 8-speed as Wheelhorse would call it, because they call the two reversed gears as, or they count them as gears, whereas on a Bolens you would only count the forwards gears. But we thought that it might have been a crossover between the two, or possibly engine swapped, because the engine serial number didn't match up with the year that the back axle would have been made with a number of gears. However, we've done some new research that kind of flips all of this on its head. Now, when we've been looking for serial numbers and stuff, what we looked at before is the importer's badge here. But what we hadn't noticed before was this little Wheelhorse badge above it, which of course we couldn't see because we were looking from above it and the dashboard was blocking it. But when we typed that into our spreadsheet of many things and cross-matched it, that showed this to be a Wheelhorse Raider 9 model. And we cross-checked the engine serial number as well, and that is the original engine for a Wheelhorse Raider 9. And the Raider 9s were made with a 6-speed rear end, or as Wheelhorse called it, an 8-speed rear end, because they count the two reverse gears. That meant that although all mechanical parts were original, one thing was still wrong. This decal on the side says Raider 10, but if you look at it closer, you can see and feel that that looks like the 10 has been stuck over the original Raider sticker, which we daren't pull that off until we can make sure that we can get an actual replacement Raider sticker, just in case that someone had put a whole new sticker on there. However, the previous owner gave us a lot of information when we bought this tractor, dating back to around the year 2000, so 20 odd years ago. And that always referred to this as the Raider 10, which meant that possibly the decal was changed by the owner 2 times before us. Now the next thing we needed to do was to check if the tractor had a spark, which we did off camera and then got a bit carried away, because the tractor doesn't have a spark. So then we started going through it, seeing what we could change to see if it had any effect. We didn't like the look of, well, all of the wiring up here and the old key, so we put a new key on, and that didn't make any difference. New spark plug as well we put on, and still no spark from it. Then we got a bit more drastic with it. We took the engine cowling off and the bonnet, so we had a bit more space around it. And we thought possibly it could be the ignition module, so we swapped on one from a spare engine, and that had no effect again, so we've just put the old one back on. So the next thing we're going to test is the coil, which on this tractor the coil and stator are all part of the same module, which is located behind the flywheel. However, we can test that by not taking that off. If we disconnect the coil wire from the ignition module here, we already have the multimeter negative cable connected up to the battery. Now if I just connect that up, we can see the resistance is around 8 or 9 ohms, but it's flickering around a bit, which we believe that if that is as it should be, that would be 400 ohms of resistance. So we believe that the coil might be faulty, so that's the next thing to check. Now let us introduce you to our other Bolens 1253 engine. You may recall we stole the starter motor off this for our red Bolens 1253 that we just fixed. And this isn't meant to be a parts engine, but it seems to be turning into it. But what we're now going to do is test the resistance on this to compare it to the other one. As I said before, if the coil is okay, then it should have 400 ohms of resistance. There you go, 438. Which means that the coil on this engine should be actually working. So what we can try now is switching the coil and stator from this engine onto the Raider. Another update for you now. We've got the flywheel off of the Raider engine and off of our other engine over here. Now we have spotted a couple of differences between the coil and stators. On this one you can see here on the backing plate there's this clip bit which you can move, and then that allows you to take this off without needing to raise the backing plate. However, on the Raider there isn't that clip bit, so we're going to have to take that off to get the stator and coil off. And also for the wiring, we did notice another difference. On the Raider you have these two charging wires going that way to the key. You have the wire going to the ignition, and you've got another wire that goes here. Whereas on this engine we have the one that goes up to ignition, then all three of them, the other ones, come this way into a connector block. So we'll have to do a bit of modification there to make that work. But the next thing we need to do is take off the backing plate on here and clean it up a bit, because that has a lot of oil and stuff stuck to it. Now undoing the 3 bolts holding on the backing plate. We've disconnected the wire that's here so that we can just take it straight off. You can just see the amount of oil, and I'm guessing it's grass that's on here. Which is surprising, seeing as it was very clean on the outside of the engine. Now pull this off. Not much better behind there either. So we'll clean this all up while we've got the opportunity while it's off. We've cleaned this back plate up now. It's quite the transformation. We've also cleaned up on the engine behind it a tiny bit. And we got quite a lot of muck that's come off that. However, we've got the coil and stator off the other engine now, and we're ready to switch it onto here. Now, let's talk wiring. If we line this up, you can see the Wheelhorse wiring. These two leads that go to the rectifier go back. However, on this one, they go forwards. And obviously, this is old wiring. We don't really want to be bending it about. So what we're going to be doing is making 2 temporary wires that go from here under the engine and round to the rectifier where these 2 would have been. And then we'll just make one to go from the other one to hook up to this. We've made up some temporary wires now. We have this one, which goes back to the rectifier. Back there. Can't really see. And then we've got this link wire, which will go in place of this one. So what we've got to do now is get the old stator and coil off, which I'm going to use an impact screwdriver because these bolts aren't shifting in a hurry. So I'll just gently hit it. There we go. That's loosened off now. I'll just loosen off the other one before I undo it. Now to pull it off, that is not budging by the looks of it. Right, so with some difficulty we've managed to pull the stator forward. We did it by getting this old screwdriver into the access points and then just gently tapping it. Then as you can see it's come forward. I think a couple more gentle taps and then I should be able to take it out.
You pull it, I'll hit it.
Okay.
Yeah, let's reposition.
We've repositioned now and we're going to try again with me and the cameraman. There we go, it's come off. Bit of a mess behind it though. We've cleaned up all behind where the stator was before. And we've also cleaned up these mating surfaces because we've never known something to be so stuck on there. Also looks like it's had a bit of a knock in the past. Right there. But it's now time to put the new stator and coil on. So just got to like line it up and then bolt it on. Believe that's lined up. Stator / coil is back on. Time to do the backing plate. With the backing plate now on, we just need to connect up the electrics that we've made and put the flywheel back on, which I'll try and do now. Which we did put the tiniest amount of oil on there because that was way too difficult to get this flywheel off. There we go, that's on. Now we're not going to put the engine cowling on to test it because we're not that confident, to be honest. Okay. Almost forgot the spring washer. We're now going to test if it has a spark. As you can see, we've got an additional earth wire just to make sure that the spark plug has a good earth, but let's see if it's got a spark. So as you saw there, it's got quite a good spark. Having now reviewed the footage, the spark was jumping around quite a bit. So having now fiddled with the high tension lead, we're going to give it another try. That's much better. So that was a success with getting the spark now, and currently our heater's broken out here, so it's quite cold in here, so I think our second success for today should be going inside in the warm and heating up a bit. But in the next video what we'll do is put all the cowling back together, put the fuel system back together and see if it'll start or even drive. But that's it for this video. I hope you've enjoyed. Comments welcome, and I'll see you in the next one. Bye.